Welcome back to Views with Hughes at Jennifer News. This is Jerome Hughes, and today I'm going to have right here the analysis for Bob Iger's recent interview at the Morgan Stanley Telecom Conference. So let's just go ahead and get into it. So we're going to see how Iger has actually answered up to his failures at Disney as well as woke Disney's failures. Okay, so woke Disney CEO Bob Iger was back on stage at the annual tech and media event hosted by Morgan Stanley, where senior analyst Bob Swinburne led the discussions. Now, everyone was curious about the future of woke Disney's streaming services like Disney Plus and Hulu, especially with their merger, the direction of ESPN and live sports, and woke Disney's direct-to-consumer efforts. And what's next for woke Disney parks and resorts after announcing a whopping $60 billion investment over the next decade? A major talking point was woke Disney Studios' recent struggles at the box office, and at the box office with a string of failing films. Okay, surprisingly, Iger kind of admitted to some responsibility which wasn't expected, but he quickly shifted the blame to his predecessor, Bob Chapek, labeling Chapek's tenure as a brief 11-month interruption in his own long leadership at woke Disney. Now, the timing of activist investors Nelson Peltz and Trian's town hall meeting was noteworthy, which would be March 7th of this week. And after Peltz released the detailed critique of, Iger's leadership to woke Disney shareholders. However, none of this was brought up at Morgan Stanley event, which wasn't really shocking since these conferences tend to go easy on CEOs, okay, because of the fact that, Morgan Stanley themselves are invested in these companies, as well as the fact that these CEOs can tend to be, a bit, say, controlling at times, but it's also all about maintaining good relationships, not putting CEOs on the spot, which is why you won't hear tough questions being asked. Now, at the conference, Iger didn't really give Peltz and others much to use for their upcoming call with the woke Disney shareholders. Okay, so he tried to address some concerns, mentioning what he saw as improvements in operating income and cost cuts, but to avoid deeper issues like the future profitability, of streaming or the real impact of the park resorts and investments. So Iger also dismissed criticism from Peltz as what he called a distraction, emphasizing his long tenure and insisting that focusing on such criticisms will only worsen woke Disney's situation. Now, this defense seemed a bit weak, where he's avoiding the real issues at hand, which is of no surprise because of the simple fact that Bob Iger will often deflect whenever there's a failure to come, as well as when he's questioned about the decisions that he made, and whenever something comes up with the failure of the different films, ratings from the Disney Plus streaming service, criticism of how things are poorly managed, especially when doesn't seem that there's not any management at Disney itself. And this is what happens whenever he decides to go ahead and get people from within the company to go ahead and take over these different positions as leaders in the company itself, with the different brands under Pixar, Lucasfilm, and even Marvel. Now, on the topic of movie production, Iger did admit to canceling some projects that didn't meet their standards and highlighted his involvement in improvements in films. In reality, those projects seem to be minor, of course, but the major IPs he continued to put out there with the woke ideology, okay? And despite facing film big criticism for a lack of audience interest in recent offerings, Iger defended the woke Disney's track record, claiming if the movies are good, audiences will show up. Yet the blame continued as Iger pointed fingers at Chapek for woke Disney's recent failures, particularly criticizing the DMED system that was introduced under Chapek's watch, which separated creative from marketing and distribution decisions. Iger also seemed to take little responsibility for the studio's flops, and despite his heavy involvement. And with that being said, it's like, the films that were canceled and stuff were minor in nature, and there were things that people didn't even know, people that are new to people, and basically didn't really care about. Just took the giant IPs and continued to go ahead and introduce them to the audiences with a political ideology attached to it. Specifically, different woke elements, strong female lead, gender swap characters, race swapped characters, and also trying to basically have forced inclusion and diversity included in these IPs that are well known to everybody. Okay, so he's continuing, of course, the blame game, and he also hinted at the challenges of managing woke Disney's massive content production, mentioning the risks of having too much control concentrated in the hands of a few executives. This is where he's actually taking this shot at Nelson Peltz and the Triangle Group, as well as his candidates. And the conversation then shifted to the issue of workplace culture, where he emphasized the negative impact of prioritizing diversity. Well, he didn't emphasize that. He was emphasizing the negative impact of prioritizing diversity over experience and talent, which has led to the big decline in content quality. Now, looking back at last year's conference, he was he did had an optimistic movie recommendations that were that contrast starkly with the actual outcomes, raising doubts about his promises for the future. Now, that simply means that he put out there how good these movies were going to be that were released last year and stuff at the time, but then those movies turned out to be huge failures. Okay. Now, the question of Iger's succession was brought up again with no clear answers, despite pressing the need for a plan. But the interview itself revealed a lot about woke Disney's current challenges and Iger's approach to leadership, focusing more on maintaining the status quo than addressing the pressing issues that's facing the company. Okay. And also raises questions about the direction that woke Disney is heading in, and whether or not Iger's long-term plans will align with the company's needs once he eventually steps down. Okay. But the thing is, he's working more on protecting his legacy. He's working more on protecting, maintaining the status quo, if you will. In other words, having woke ideology put into films, into shows and everything. Even in commercials that you'll see that Disney's promoted with the theme parks in the movie theaters. Okay. But we see here that Bob Iger is nothing more than a reuse and recycle kind of CEO, where he takes the different content that we know and familiar with in Star Wars and Marvel brands, as well as Pixar and everything, and then try to go ahead and change them up, adding political ideology in order to gain newer fans and stuff, and trying to keep the older ones. But the problem is, keeping the older fans or the core audience and stuff is not his priority right now, and he thinks he's doing that, but the problem is they've turned away themselves. Okay. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Also, be sure to include any additional thoughts that you might have upon this particular topic. If you enjoy what I shared in this video, go ahead, smash the like button, and share far wide across social media. And also, within those comments, be sure to let me know, what do you think about Iger's handling of the situation and everything? Do you think that the softball questions are beneficial to him? Should he have been asked far more tougher questions? Or what do you think about, his plans for the future of woke Disney itself? Are you optimistic, or do you think that it's time for a replacement in the board, and as well as Iger? Because remember, Iger won't leave the helm until about 2026, but in reality, it's going to be somewhere along the lines of 2031. Okay, so let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Also, be sure to smash the like button if you enjoyed this video, and share far wide across social media. And if you have done so already, you enjoyed all the content up out there, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, click bell notifications, so that way you're notified of future uploads and updates. Until then, peace.